Hello, everyone. Welcome to In Session How to Integrate Healing in Art Based Programs with Dream, Create, Inspire Tour. My name is Kristen, aka Like Water, and I'm super excited to welcome you here today. So, I'm joined by the incredible Destiny Hardney, who's the co founder of Dream, Create, Inspire Tour, and she's going to share with us the impact of healing practices in art based programs, and she's going to teach us some techniques to build connection, facilitate healing, and liberation. So, Destiny is a Colorado native with a deep love for her community. She has a sociology degree concentrating in pre law and criminology from Spelman College. Destiny's diverse experiences working in social justice, college and career readiness, restorative, and healing practices have fueled her passion for community focused development, specifically with the youth. So she continues to cultivate environments where youth have the freedom to think, verbalize, and advance the skills and abilities they already possess. And she's going to share some of those tools and some of that knowledge with us here today. So if you weren't already excited, I know you're excited now. Please join me in welcoming Destiny Hardney. Hey, Destiny.
Hey, Kristen, thank you. Thank you for that intro. I was like, oh, that sounds dope. All right, I'm ready for this.
Thank you for being here for sure.
Yeah.
So, we're so grateful to have you with us, Destiny. And just a bit before we dive into all of your wealth of knowledge, Destiny's going to chat with us to cover those tools of impacting the community with healing practices for the first 45 minutes, and then I'm going to jump back in and facilitate the Q&A at the end. So if you guys have any questions as she's going through everything that she has prepared, please drop it in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So, a few housekeeping items to cover before we jump in. This is a supportive and uplifting space, so we want to keep all dialogue in the chat respectful as we get into the discussion. Also, please feel free right now to use the chat to let us know where you're tuning in from, what you're excited to hear about, just all those great things. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and yeah, we can build those connections as well. But make sure that you change the little blue bar from hosts and panelists to everyone so that we can all jump in on that conversation. And yes, like I said before, if you have any questions that come up during the webinar, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So drop your questions there, not in the chat, so that it doesn't get lost in the sauce, as that can definitely happen. And you'll also receive a survey just to let us know how you enjoyed the webinar and any other topics that you would like for us to cover and in session. So without further ado, I'm going to get out of the way and let Destiny take it away and give us all this dope knowledge. So Destiny Hardney, so grateful to have you take it away.
Thank you. Grateful to be here and grateful to see all the different cities in the chat so far. I see Denver, I see Commerce City, I see Atlanta, UK. What? Okay, we got North Carolina, Charlotte in here. Okay, so keep putting those in the chat. But before we even really get into the content, I want to just invite all of you to take a few deep breaths. So wherever you are, if you're at work, if you're at home, if you're outside, wherever you are, just take 3 really deep breaths, cleansing breaths. My hope is that throughout this process today, throughout this time today, we feel grounded, we feel at peace, we feel what I hope to create in the workshops that I'm going to be talking about with y'all today. So at any point, if you have a question or if you have a thought, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm real flexible. So, I have this whole presentation together, but we can go in different directions if we need to. We can have conversation if we need to. So this is a release of space to practice what we're actually talking about as well. So first of all, my name is Destiny. I'm here from Denver, Colorado. I'm in Denver right now. I'm a native. I love being here in these types of spaces, whether virtual or in person, and really just leading and being in a space of talking about and practicing healing as it relates to art. We know art is healing. We already know that. We all experience that. But when we're really intentional about it, it changes things. So I wanted to start with just a little bit of context of who we are with Dream, Create, Inspire Tour. Like Kristen said, I'm a co-founder of this organization that is really rooted in the ideas of collective healing, liberation, and collaboration. And we typically do this through art-based workshops. We also do community events out in different spaces in different cities, around the globe. That's where the tour part of Dream, Create, Inspire Tour comes from. And our conversation today is really going to focus in on those learning spaces, those art-focused learning spaces. So in our learning spaces, we typically are, in community with professional and independent artists who are oftentimes guiding and helping, youth create, as well as helping elders create, as well as helping incarcerated folks create in these spaces. And we know that when we're doing that, just on a basic level, we're already creating a healing environment. So incorporating really intentional practices and incorporating really intentional techniques has just elevated it to another level that, we already knew was happening, but we are able to share with all of our communities, no matter where we are. So with this, like, our purpose today is really going to be to hold space and guide you all through, some of these reflections, some of this self-expression and creation, as well as to give you some techniques to take back with you. So if you're deciding you want to be in these, learning spaces, do any workshops, or if you're just in a creative space on your own, these are all things that can happen, whether you are, in a virtual space, whether you're in person, no matter where you are and what you're trying to create. So one of the kind of the three pillars of what we talk about with Dream, Create, Inspire Tour is collective healing. And I think about that as kind of being on a journey and journeying in community, because we all have our individual healing journeys. And that means, we're not having a focus of we want to get healed by the end of this workshop, or we want to get healed by the end of this creation, but we're in a journey and we're doing it together. We're making progress together, we're learning together, we're loving together, we're in it together. So with this, we want to really focus and reflect, always focus in and reflect. Also, it's just a really helpful way, a beneficial way to be able to expand sources of inspiration. So if you're coming to a space and you're ready to create, but you had a moment to reflect first, or you have a moment to kind of focus your intention first, the source of inspiration may change or may expand from where you were coming from in the first place. It's also a really amazing way to inform artistic creation. So if we're practicing mindfulness, if we're practicing, healing, if we're practicing having dialogue and conversation with one another, first, think about what creation comes out after that. And I love to think about these workshops and these art-based learning communities as a place to practice it, but also it's going to be used anywhere and everywhere you go. So if we practice a quick three deep breaths at the beginning of every workshop, we kind of get used to taking deeper breaths in different scenarios and different situations. We kind of get used to thinking about how are we breathing when we're performing on a stage? How are we breathing when we're in a stressful situation? So really starting to think about how everything we do in these, workshop and in these learning spaces is going to expand to other parts of our lives. So for this part, I really want us to practice. So I know in virtual spaces, it can be a little awkward, it can be a little weird. So let's embrace the awkward, let's embrace the weird, let's embrace wherever we are and whatever we're bringing into this space. And I invite you all to get whatever it is that you came to get, whatever you came to receive. So for the first part of this, we're going to do a little bit of practicing together. And the way we're going to do that is to really visualize what this could feel like, what this could look like for you. So if you're in this space, I see a lot of different cities, a lot of different spaces that you're joining from. Think about what do you create on a regular basis? Are you creating music? Are you songwriting? Are you creating melodies? Are you creating beats? Do you do visual art? Do you write? Do you not even consider yourself a creator yet? We can get to that too a little bit later. But just think about if you're in that kind of space, how can this feel and how can this look for you? So the first thing I want us to do is really be in a space of, well, that skipped way far. Be in a space of breathing. So at the beginning, we did 3 deep breaths together. But right now, I want us to really, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. If you want to get more comfortable, if you want to stand up, sit, whatever feels good in your body, and just pay attention to how you're breathing. So if you're breathing really quickly, if you're breathing really slowly, do you feel your breath coming into your chest? Do you feel it coming into your abdomen? Once you've noticed it, did you try to change it? Did you accept it? Take a moment, just notice that breath. When you feel comfortable, you've noticed, you've identified what kind of breathing you're doing. Now I want you to notice what's going on around you. Are you in a public space? Are you by yourself? What do you hear? What can you see? You can look around if you want. What can you smell? What can you taste? And what can you feel? So you can think about what you can feel tangibly with your hands, with your fingers, but also what do you feel emotionally? And as you notice and think about what you're feeling emotionally, I want you to also think about where in your body you feel it. If you're feeling calm, do you feel that in your chest? Do you feel that in your arms? Do you feel it in your hands? If you're feeling happy, do you feel it behind your head? Do you feel it in your legs? And once you notice where you feel it, I want you to also try to identify what that feeling feels like in your body. And I know that can be kind of confusing. So think about, is it a tingly sensation? Do you feel tension? Do you feel free flowing? Try to really name that for yourself. So now I want us to reflect. We're all in different spaces, different time zones right now. But I want you to think about one good thing that has happened to you so far today. It could be the favorite part of your day. It could be the highlight of your day. It could be because you ate your favorite breakfast. It could be because you ate breakfast today. But really reflect on today. What was the best part so far? And how does that create gratitude for you? Now I want you to imagine this same time tomorrow. What would make this time tomorrow an amazing day, an amazing experience for you and for the people around you? Take a minute to really imagine that, as detailed, as specific as you can possibly be. So this is the point in workshops where we get to creation. So for the sake of today and for the sake of this webinar, I want you to think about what you would create from the space you're currently in. Now that you've had a moment to breathe, now that you've had a moment to notice, to reflect, to imagine, what's the next thing that comes to your mind? What's the next thing that you feel in your body that you need to be doing? Is it movement? Do you want to listen to some music? Do you want to write some music? What do you feel inspired to do? So this has been kind of an exercise that is often used in these creative spaces, not only to get us ready to start the creation process, but to practice having those techniques that we can take with us, like I said earlier, wherever we go. If we know how to ask ourselves questions throughout the day and practice mindfulness throughout the day, it's going to create better experiences for ourselves. It's going to create a more peaceful existence completely, but also, a more aware existence for ourselves. So for this next part, now that we've kind of gotten to practice one of the tools together, I want to take us through an example of how we're able to do this within a workshop space. So it's going to be a little bit more accelerated, a more condensed version of it, but feel free, if you have the space, if you have the time, if you have the tools with you to be writing, you can use your phone in the note section if you like. However you feel like you want to engage with this, you can also just write it down. I will share a lot of these resources at the end, so don't feel like you have to get it all right now, but wanted to kind of show you what this looks like in real time. So this is an example of a workshop that I facilitated in order to create a mantra. And the reason we were creating mantras was to get us started with the songwriting process. So, we oftentimes when I'm working with youth, they're talking about or asking like, oh, I want to write a song, but I don't know how, or I don't know what to write about, or I don't think I'll be good at it. Maybe someone else should write it and I'll sing it or I'll rap it. But really thinking about like, we can all participate in this process, whether or not we want to be professional songwriters or not, we can all contribute, we can all write, we can all do this process together. So this one specifically is a really amazing and a really pretty simple way to start to incorporate these ideas of healing, these ideas of mindfulness, this idea of being introspective first and then coming outward in order to collaborate. So in this workshop, the objective was really for participants to be able to reflect, which we've all gotten to do together today, to collaborate. So we do that both virtually or in person, no matter how we're doing these, and then be able to explore how to create a mantra for ourselves and be able to create a shared meditation from that at the end. So down here, you can see we have kind of a word wall. So if people are in a workshop and don't know what that means, if we're talking about mantras, if we're talking about meditation, we're gonna have some small definitions for people to be able to know, like, this is what this means, this is what we're moving through. So here, if you can't see my screen or can't read it, it reads that a mantra is a word or sound repeated to aid in concentration and meditation, okay? So the first step that we go through is really what we call the solo. So this is the reflective process. So I invite you, I'm gonna go through it pretty quickly, but if you want to participate, if you want to try to do this for yourself, feel free to do this for yourself. So if you ask yourself, what do you love? And you're able to just list that as first things that come to mind. We're not spending a whole lot of time trying to think about it, but the first things that come to mind, we're gonna list those things. If we think about what motivates you, as quickly as you can, first things that come to mind, we're going to list off what motivates you. Then we're going to get to, what do you aspire to? And that's a really broad, it's a really big, it's a really abstract question. And I like to leave it that way because I want it to inspire or to trigger whatever it is people are feeling, whatever it is people are thinking, whatever comes to mind, it can go there. And then I want people to think about their own interest, their own taste in music. So what is a song lyric that resonates with you the most? It could be a song that you put on repeat. It could be a song that you put on every morning to hype yourself up, to feel good, to calm yourself down, to wind down before bedtime. So think about a song that is kind of your go-to, and try to pick out maybe the chorus or a verse that really resonates. From here, we're really able to create the phrase that becomes a mantra. So based on these 4 questions that I asked above, I asked participants to try to combine those ideas, the ideas of love, the ideas of motivation, the ideas of aspiration, and interest, or music that they've already experienced, background experience, and put that into 3 to 5 words. And that can be difficult. It can be hard. It can take a while. It can be a process of dialogue and conversation and back and forth to really get to that 3 to 5 words and that phrase. But we can show people like it can be that simple, and you've got a mantra. It doesn't mean that you don't want to change it. It doesn't mean you don't want to adjust it. It doesn't mean you don't want to add to it, subtract from it, but you have a starting place. And when you're writing a song, this can be the starting place for the theme of your song. This can be the starting place for the course of your song. This can be the starting place for a verse of your song. So understanding that these little pieces of what we're doing, and these little, these small experiences that can take 5 minutes, that can take 30 minutes, can inform that creative process. So if you all did do any of this, if you did write anything down, feel free to put things in the chat. It doesn't have to be your whole mantra. It can be any of the questions that you answered. Feel free to just throw them in the chat so people can see what we're thinking about. So up until this point, we've talked a lot about kind of individually and internally being able to go through some of these processes and really be in our own minds and our own emotions and our own bodies. And the next step is to start to collaborate, because we definitely believe that, individually, we all have our uniqueness. Individually, we all have our experiences. We all have what makes us us. And then once we're able to bring that to a space and connect with other people and what it is that makes them them, that's where the power really comes. And so I love being in learning spaces or even creative spaces, because I think about this also being a tool that can happen in like a studio space where we're trying to create, we're trying to get to something, but we're not quite there yet. But being able to share that mantra, share those thoughts, share those ideas with whoever you're around. And with no shame, there's no right or wrong, without any feedback on it, really just purely, this is what came out of my process. Purely, this is what came to me. This is what I'm contributing to this space. And from there, you all are able to talk to each other. You're able to, put it to a melody, say it out loud, repeat it with each other, and really decide as a group, what do we want to represent our group? Is there one mantra that came out that someone said that we're like, that resonates with all of us? We're all down for that. Or do we need to combine some of them? Do we need to, create one really long one and then narrow it down to something that's a little bit shorter, that's a little bit more condensed? Or is it inspiring a song? Is it inspiring some verses? Do we need to actually expand it and not condense it? So there's so much movement and there's so much work that can happen from just one short 3 to 5 word phrase when it's shared out into the space. So I apologize, I just jumped so far ahead, but I want us to try kind of the next step a little bit together. So if you have any ideas in your mind, whether you put it in the chat or not, about kind of what your mantra would be or what it could be about, or any of the questions that I posed earlier that you're still thinking about, one of the next tools that we use is a tool called Soundscape. And this is an online studio for those of you who haven't used it before. And you're able to, record in it, you're able to create beats in it, you're able to create soundscapes in it. So I'm going to show you all kind of an example of a soundscape that we've created in a previous workshop. And I'll play 2 different soundscapes for you all. And I want to just see kind of responses in the chat. So the questions are going to be when you're listening to each one, and I'll do one at a time. So when I play the first soundscape, excuse me, think about, where do you feel that soundscape in your body? And if there's a lot going on around you, that can be kind of difficult sometimes. So maybe you need to close your eyes. Maybe you need to really try to go inward. So really try to pay attention to where you feel the vibrations, where you feel the sound in your body. And then paying attention to what emotion it brings up. And does it trigger any memories for you? Okay, so I'm gonna play the soundscape, and just feel free to put anything in the chat as soon as you start to see things. Thank you for putting the link there already. I'm going to do that one more time for just a shorter amount of time. If you have any reflections to put in the chat, and then we'll go to number 2. So this next one is soundscape number 2. So pay attention to where you feel this one in your body. And we'll do it one more time. I saw a lot of heart, head. Sound healing, sound bath. That's perfect. That's perfect. That's exactly what it is. So notice, I think I'm still playing. Notice that those 2 soundscapes were completely different. You know, the first one kind of had a little beat you can groove to a little bit. You know, the second one was completely nature focused. So when we think about using tools like meditation or using tools that are, soundscape related, sound bath related, sound healing related, having two things that feel almost opposite in a space can really allow people to decide, what direction do I want to go? What direction do I feel in my body? What direction is my intuition pulling me toward as I move forward in this creation process? I love the reflection that, I think it was Lauren said, this feels like motivation, this feels like focus, and it feels like meditation and work. So thinking about how you can bridge those two together as creatives, especially bridging those together. So work doesn't always have to feel like work. Sometimes work feels like meditation. Sometimes work feels like healing. Sometimes when you're creating a song for a purpose, for a performance, because you have this timeline or this deadline, it can still feel like this. It can still feel mindful. It can still feel, like this process is coming from not just up here, but it's coming from the entire body. It's coming from all the parts of us that inform us and tell us whether to move forward, whether to adjust, whether to stop, engaging our entire body in it. So we're not so heavy and leaning so much on just the mind and the logic of it. Feels like water pushing me back. I love it. So once we kind of get through the creating the mantra and having the actual soundscape, we invite people to participate in the actual meditation process. So you heard the two soundscapes, and I'm going to play for us that entire meditation that was created. So when in Soundtrap, and I'll go back so you can see what I'm talking about, there are options to add vocals, to add sound. And what I was doing when you listen to two different soundscapes was I just muted one at a time, but they're all present in the same studio right now. So you can see we have two different soundscapes that are going to play together. So we actually ended up in this workshop combining those two soundscapes. We actually added some vocals. So we had an artist, a guest artist that came to this session and listened through the whole thing to those who were creating and went into the studio and recorded the vocals for us. Created background, and you see, if you can read it, it says Aya Jade Giggles. That's my daughter's name, Aya Jade. So she was here with me during the workshop giggling. And we put all of this together into this soundscape and we're able to move through it together. So the same way that we did during this workshop, we were able to facilitate, which also happened virtually. I'm going to invite you all to listen, to get comfortable, invite you to meditate if you would like. If you wrote down your own mantra, feel free to be saying that out loud or in your mind if you want. But there will be some mantras being said during this meditation that you can listen to and hear what came out of this creative process. I'll give you a moment, get into the space you feel comfortable. Take a couple of cleansing breaths, and we can do this together.
I am legacy in motion. My joy is a force to be reckoned with. I am strong. I am intelligent. I'm powerful. Optimistic. I am legacy in motion. Determination. My joy is a force to be reckoned with. I am strong, intelligent, powerful. Sunshine. I am legacy in motion. Connection. My joy is a force to be reckoned with. I'm strong. I am legend. I am powerful. I am the person I need to be. I am imperfectly learning. Gratitude. I am the person I need to be. Compassion. I am imperfectly learning. Love. I am the person I need to be. Light. I am imperfectly learning. Leader. All in divine timing. All in divine timing. Satisfied. All in divine timing. Healing. All in divine. I am showing up. Advocate. I am here. I am love. I am friends first.
So listening to that, you hear the joy, you hear the motivation, you hear the daughter's giggles, and that's the joy part right there. That's the best joy part right there. Also, you hear the combination of different mantras come together, but fitting into these two soundscapes. So I love to use that as an example because we can see that there's so much individual, there's so much reflection, there's so much that went into that process for each person that participated. And then we were able to bring it together for everyone to have a meditation that can be used for the entire group. So I encourage y'all to think about that in your creative process, whether it's with friends or whether you are in a learning space or you are facilitating learning spaces. How can you really dive deep into the individual uniqueness of every person in the space, into the experiences of every person in the space, and be able to come back to a collective way of healing together, or a collective tool for healing together. So I have some suggestions, some advice, some things for y'all to think about and to be able to implement that, kind of make it a little bit simple. So if there's some techniques you want to try for yourself, some things that you want to incorporate in your creation process, whether you're in the studio, whether you are in a creative space, whether you're in a learning space, some things to really try out and try to include. Always open the space and always close the space. So you want it to really feel like, okay, this is getting started. This is the beginning of this journey that we're taking, whether it's for 10 minutes, whether it's for an hour, whether it's going to be days long. Make sure you want to open that space and you want to close it. And that can be with a question, that can be with some, deep breathing, some breathing techniques. It can be with some movement, it can be stretching, it can be yoga specific, it can be, taking a walk really quick, but making sure you're transitioning out of whatever you were doing before that, and you're really all into this space that you're coming into. And similarly, when you're closing the space and time, making sure you're doing that same thing. So if it's a question you're reflecting on with whoever is there with you, if you need to just do some deep breathing, if you need to stretch, make sure it feels like you're closing that part of your day, that part of your time before you move on to something else. Another thing to really, or a few things to really try to incorporate are one, grounding technique. So that can even be some of those things I talked about with breathing. There are lots of grounding techniques, and there are some resources I'll share with you after this slide, but just keeping in mind, like something that is going to ground me in this space, that's going to ground me in this time, ground me in my creative process. One thing that is reflective. So be sure that you're asking some questions of yourself, of the other people who are there. Make sure some questions are happening. Also, making sure there's something that's going to spark imagination and emotion. So that can be related to that reflective question. It can be something completely different, but something that is going to get kind of the mind moving in a way that is going to help you to really produce and create what you came to create. And I would really suggest, and this came up in the chat a little bit earlier, sound baths and soundscapes. That is a really amazing way to start to really visualize and really feel what you are feeling that day. What are you, maybe you've been having a hard day, or maybe you've had a whole lot of things going on, but really trying to focus in on, like, what does this vibration do for me right now? What does this sound create for me right now? I also suggest visualization. So I did kind of an adapted version at the beginning with asking you to imagine, or asking you to think about what it would feel like if you're in a creative space and you're starting with breathing, or you're starting with this reflection, you're starting with noticing. So really being intentional about like you tapping into that imagination here. I always suggest meditations. Those can also be used to open and close spaces, as well as movement. And that movement can be as simple as a stretch. It can be, the deep breathing. I suggest a little bit more than the breathing, but whatever you all feel comfortable with. If you combine things like yoga practices, like Tai Chi, if you want to walk, those types of things can really start to move the energy through your body. And of course, we know that impacts what is going to come out through our mind as well. So really trying to pay attention to those types of things and incorporate those types of things. And for those suggestions, all of those can be found with online tools. Like Liberate is one of my favorites. If y'all haven't used Liberate before, that is a meditation app that is really geared for people of color and healing the trauma that people of color experience, but as well as Insight Timer and Sage. All of those have meditation resources. All of those have sound bath resources. All of those have, yoga, movement resources. So they're all in one place. So you don't have to try to start with, oh, am I going to go on YouTube and try to figure out, is this a legitimate resource or not, or go on all these different places, but really start with the apps that are geared toward, these resources being accessible for everyone. And really some of the main takeaways from doing this in your process is that you get to really create with healing and wellness intentionally. A lot of times there are processes and there are rituals and there are things that we're doing and we're not really thinking about them being healing, and they are. So this gets us to really be able to think about how this is, a part of our process, and this is a part of our wellness journey. I also say start with yourself. If this feels like, I don't know if I can really do this with other people yet, or I don't really know how to implement this with other people, start with yourself. And I always suggest like learning some of these mindfulness techniques and getting a healing coach if you can. If you know about local healers, or if you want to get on Google, Google is the best resource. Look for people in your area who can help walk you through some of this learning. And once you feel comfortable doing it in yourself, it's going to feel really amazing to do it with other people. Tap into some of the rituals, some of the ceremonies, some of the practices you already do. If you wake up in the morning and you light candles, if you wake up in the morning and you meditate, if you wake up in the morning and you journal, start to implement some of those things into your creative process. And always engage with other local artists, engage with other healers in the community, because this is never something that we want to do on our own. These journeys are always collective. These journeys are always in community. We don't have to try to figure it out on our own. So of course, we have space for questions. I know there's some things in the chat already, but love to see kind of the reflections in what was already happening and the conversations already going on in the chat. But I would love to, just give you all some time to ask me anything that you would like to ask.
Hey, Destiny, that was incredible.
So
much love is coming in. Just, thanking you, gratitude in the chat for facilitating this environment. And we did have a question come through from Shakes in Johannesburg, South Africa. And paraphrasing, they're asking, how can someone who is new to this space, and you kind of spoke to this a bit, but how can they effectively collaborate and bring this type of practice to their team if they've never done it?
Yeah, so kind of related to what I talked about a little bit, but try it by yourself first. So there are some of those resources that I shared. Now I'm happy to put some links in the chat too, but like Liberate is one that I really love, because there are meditations you can do, but there are also talks you can listen to, and some of them come from actual classes. So you're learning, about how to do it, and you're learning about, how to engage with the practice. So if you're creating a mantra, for example, you're walked through the process of it versus being on just the side of, oh, they're talking about it, but I don't really know how to do it, but really being able to be walked through it. I think for myself, some of the most powerful things that I've been able to do is really engage in person also with some people in the community who are healers. So if you don't know where to look or where to go, I'd say Google is my best friend, but also, like metaphysical stores, a lot of times they will have healers who work there, that's their job. And they have sessions that you can attend, you can do one-on-ones with them. And there are ways that you can start to learn these techniques for yourself so that you feel comfortable sharing them with other people. And also my advice is like, try to keep it simple and start with one thing at a time. So you kind of saw today, I went through a few different things, but we didn't always do all of those things. It was really like, okay, we meditate. So let's start with meditation. We feel good about that. We feel comfortable with that. So let's start there. Okay, we're starting to learn how to use mantras. Let's incorporate that. We're learning about how to breathe because we were taking this Tai Chi class. Let's incorporate that. So I encourage everyone to really learn as much as possible. Go to these classes if you can. Engage with the virtual tools, but also if you have local people in your community that you can go to for the guidance and for the practice it yourself first, and then it's going to feel so natural to share it with other people.
I love that. And it definitely speaks to, the more comfortable you are with a thing, the easier it is to share with others, and you find what resonates with you. Like you may not, Tai Chi may not resonate with you, but
Right.
yoga may, or meditation may.
Mhm.
So everything, everybody is an individual. So lean into the things that feel good to you. We have another question. Have you done this kind of work with different age groups? If so, what were the different results?
Mhm. So different age groups from elementary all the way through adults, really, we've done this with. The different results, my favorite is always like the young kids, like elementary age, because they get so excited and their imaginations are so big. So when we think about being in a space of asking questions and reflecting and imagining, the younger kids have so much fun with it. And it creates, that already creates healing, that creates the joy, that creates, a space where the creation that comes out of it, it's just like we never would have thought that's what was coming out of it from the beginning. And with adults, it usually ends up being a much more emotional process, because as we're reflecting and as we are having conversations, it sometimes can bring up things that evoke sadness or evoke anger or evoke, all these different emotions that maybe haven't been shared in a collective space. And they're so powerful though, because if there are things that come up that people have just been holding on to, there's a release that happens. So whereas with little kids, they're just excited and this is so fun and it's so amazing. With adults, it's like, oh, we all got to have a collective release, and we all got to have this like collective bonding and connection experience that maybe we didn't think we were going to have coming into the space. And even being a facilitator of it, like I talk about doing these things, but I do it too while we do it. So virtually, sometimes it's weird. I'm on screen with my eyes closed and all that, but like we're doing the processes while participants are doing it. So it's not like they're getting it and we're not. Like every time I do a workshop where we're incorporating any of these healing practices, I'm healing, at the same time. So thinking about the different age groups, like the process looks very similar, and the questions might change a little bit, the approach might change a little bit, the energy might change a little bit, but we'd never know what we're going to get out of it. And I love that part, because once the creation part starts, it goes in so many directions that we would never even imagine or never plan for. We can't really plan for it. So the age groups are like one of my favorite parts of being able to go from, the youngest in preschool and kindergarten, and then being with adults and having really depthful conversations, and then deciding like we want to follow up, we want to be in community, we want to do these things together continually, and really setting the space up to be able to do that is, one of my favorite parts of it.
I love that, and we're grateful to just have had a snippet of that, those gifts that you're giving to the community. We have 3 more questions. We're going to try our very best to get to them.
Okay.
Royce Lovett from Seattle asks, how can sound and tones bring healing?
Mm-hmm. So I think about in the ways that we use it, we do use sound baths, and we do use sound to kind of set the intention and tone of spaces. I haven't really gotten super into like hertz. If you see, like if you search different like sound vibrations and different sounds that are healing for like your different chakras or healing for different parts of your life. There are healing sounds that are used for that purpose. We haven't gotten super deep into using that in our workshop so far, but we do use it in a way for people to decide kind of what direction they want to go. So if we create, or if they want to search different sounds, and different vibrations within our workshops, we're able to decide, or not even decide, but really go internally and say, like, what is our body telling us? What is our body feeling? What is coming to mind for us that is giving us direction on what sound to use in this space? And I love that process can happen, and I love that is healing. And I know it is related to that work with certain vibrations as being healing for certain parts of the body or certain parts of emotion. We just haven't gone in depth about really intentionally choosing certain sounds or certain vibrations for our workshops. As of right now, we might at some point, but I do know there are a lot of resources for learning about, especially sounds and vibrations as they're related to chakras and healing different chakras in the body.
Awesome. Love that. Yeah. And I love and acknowledge your continuing to bring it back to self and,
Mhm.
going within to listen to yourself and what you need
Yeah.
specifically.
Our bodies
And that's super
know.
important.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have a question from Lauren. Personal question for you, Destiny. Have you heard of,
So,
I don't know how to pronounce this, but
so I've seen this
are
word before and I don't know how to pronounce it either, but I do know what Lauren is talking about.
okay. So, and would you consider doing a class there virtually or in person?
Yeah, so yes, of course. And ironically, the way that I learned about the space, so it's a space in Denver. It's actually a really cool space, but I learned about it through SoFar because there was SoFar shows happening there. At least prior to COVID. I don't know if there have been any since then. And then I saw it on SoFar's website. It was like, that's such an amazing space. I want to be in there. So I haven't been there physically, but I've seen pictures of it, and I would love to do virtual or in-person class there because I want to go there.
Awesome. So anybody who wants to know what this is, I'll just spell it and you can definitely search it if you'd like to. ARCHIPELAGO Denver. So feel free to look it up if you'd like. I just don't want to butcher it. But thank you, Lauren, for that question. And then the last question, just in enough time, what is the most important or surprising thing you've learned from a session as a facilitator?
Hmm. I think the most important and surprising are the same. Um, and that is that I have to participate in the entire process too. Like I can't just facilitate and expect kind of the participants to do the work and not me do the work at the same time, because we're still sharing space. We're still, exchanging energy. We're absorbing each other's energy. We're exchanging each other's energy. So if I tried to separate myself from the process and try to kind of create a space where only the participants are going through it, it doesn't work as well. And I find even for myself, like being pulled to participate in it anyway. So even when I did try to have that separation, and a lot of my original kind of facilitation came from formal education. So you think about like a teacher and student, but really letting go of that idea and that power dynamic and just being in the space together, and we're all going through these things together, has really made a complete difference for me and completely changed the way that I facilitate. And knowing that whatever I'm coming in with matters just as much as what everyone else is coming in with. And we're going to do it together, and we're going to go in whatever direction together we need to go in. And that is where that collective peace and that collective healing really does happen, when we all are doing it in the same space together.
Wow, I love that. And I appreciate, your willingness to be open and vulnerable and going through that process with those who are in space and in community with you. It's huge. And we felt it. I felt it. I could tell in the chat that everybody was really in that moment. So thank you so much, Destiny. This was absolutely incredible. So needed. Such a great way to start off in session in 2022.
Yes.
Um, and so much love to everyone in the chat. Thank you so much for being vulnerable as well, participating in the exercises, and your interest in sharing these techniques with your community as well. So we hope that you join us again for next month's in session February 17th, which is going to be focused on production. But please feel free to connect with Destiny and Dream Create Inspire Tour. Feel free to check out those resources that she so graciously shared with us to help us in our own healing journey, as well as facilitating healing spaces for others within our practice. Um, and without further ado, just thank you so much. It has been my absolute pleasure to host this and be a part of this space with you all. I am Kristen, aka Like Water. Destiny, thank you so much. And this has been In Session.
Thank you.